All right. I call to order the collaboration for early childhood meeting on October 23rd, 2024 at 6:06 p.m. in the boardroom of OPR High School. Lisa, would you please call the roll?
For District 200, Dr. Johnson.
Here.
Dr. Livingston.
Here.
And Dr. Maharaj. For District 97, Dr. Shaw. Ms. Ross-Driven. Here. And Ms. Kim. Here. And for the Village of Oak Park, Mr. Jackson, Ms. Skaman. Here. And Ms. Robinson. Here. From the Collaboration for Early Childhood, Ms. Reynolds. Here. And Ms. Crawford. Here. And also from District 97, Dr. Lofton. Here. And Dr. Johnson. Here.
Okay, are there any public comments?
No public comments?
I'd like to approve the minutes of our January 18th, 2024 collaboration for early childhood meeting. Minutes as presented. Are there any corrections or adjustments that need to be made? Thanks. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Please. Okay. More financial reports.
Yes, I can give the financial reports on behalf of the collaboration. In the packet were the first quarter financial reports for the organization. Our fiscal year goes from July to June. We have just wrapped up our audit and it is close to final at this point. Our finance committee has reviewed it. We do not have any issues. It is a clean audit. It is not quite final. It should be final in the next week or two and approved at that time. And then we will share it with your fiscal agents like we do each year. And it's also always posted on our website along with our 990 form. The 990 form is also part of those financials that are close to approval. And all the numbers and everything have been okayed by the finance committee. And there are no issues with that either. So that is in good shape. Our quarterly financials we share with you just so that you have an idea of how we are, like our status as a healthy nonprofit organization, which we are. We have on average usually about 6 to 8 months cash on hand. Right now, we do have about 7 months cash on hand. Our policies require us to have 3 months on hand. And then this past year, which I believe has been the fifth year in a row that we've invoiced the IGA boards for all 6 of the available payments for the year. We do that every other month. So we did another full year of IGA payments this past year. And the IGA does account for approximately 81 to last year, I think it was about 84%. This year was 81% of our overall revenue. The auditors go through a calculation that I'm happy to share with you if you would like. It's quite complex, but it is there for you to review if you'd like, of whether we need to return any unspent funds to the IGA at this time of year. They determined that we do not, and our board did accept that those numbers were correct. So we have spent all of the funds again this year, in addition to some grant funds that we received and individual private donations as well. So I think those are the kind of the highlights of our expenses. Our expenses and revenues are on track for our budget for where we are at this time of year. We're about a quarter of the way into the year. And, our timing is such that we do not have our revenue and expenses equally divided across 12 months of a year. It kind of ebbs and flows and everything is pretty much how we plan it to be. So we're in good shape. Any questions with that? I'll pass it over to D97 Finance because they are the fiscal agent for the contract.
Hello, everybody. So since I updated our financials in the administrative reserve account, the balance for the collaboration of early childhood administrative reserve account is $333,469.34 as of October 9th. The interest paid between January 2024 and September 2024 is $2,429.47. The collaboration requested funds for the first and second payments for fiscal year 24-25 from the individual accounts in the following amounts for District 97. $85,515 was requested. District 200, $74,552 was requested, and from the Village of Oak Park, $59,203 was requested. And also the bank balances as of October 9th, 2024, District 97, $151,726.11. District 200 had $126,042.17, and the Village of Oak Park has $116,136.19. Anybody have any questions?
Seeing no questions, let's move on to the admin report, IGA disclosure.
Thank you. Yeah, that was neat. Awesome. So thank you, everybody. It's so nice to see you all and be together. What we like to do at this time of year is walk you through our big data report and pull together some highlights to show you what we've been up to this last year together. And one of the things we like to do is just start by laying some of the foundation about our local early childhood work in the context of both state and national activities, just so that we can see if there are things happening here locally that are playing out in other parts of the country, if there are unique things here in our community. So that's where we're going to get started. The first thing we want to highlight, we talked about this last year when we were together, is that the state of Illinois has officially approved Department of Early Childhood. And so what that will do is consolidate several different departments, the early childhood components of those departments under one administrative department in the state. We've talked a lot about early childhood as a pretty fragmented system, and this is one of the efforts to address that. So much like we at the local level are thinking about bringing together home visiting and childcare and early intervention and family engagement activities, the state is thinking about how to do that on a much bigger level. So this is a year of transition. We are watching closely and I think eager with a lot of our partners to see how that continues to shake out. But it's pretty exciting because there are a lot of administrative and just burdensome barriers that get in the way for both local providers and for families. So a family, for example, who's getting early intervention, subsidized childcare, state-funded preschool may have to fill out the same intake packet 3 separate times, may need to qualify for this service at 185% of federal poverty level, for this service at 200% of federal poverty level. And it's really confusing for families, and that can be a barrier to access and engagement. So we're excited to see those services come together and get a little bit more, hopefully, streamlined. What I failed to mention, if you have questions or comments as I'm going, please wave at me frantically, and I would love to hear those as we. A next exciting thing that's happening at the state level is another year of funding for a system called Birth to 5. Birth to 5 follows the regional offices of education across the state, and so there is now a Birth to 5 region in each ROE. With the intention, again, of helping to streamline, bring services together, and really elevate the voices of families and providers in the early childhood system up to the state level to inform some of that policy making. So some of our team members here who are with us today are part of the, we're Region 1BB, rolls off the tongue. And they're part of the Action Council, which is the early childhood professionals who are advising at the regional level, as well as part of the Family Council, where that's really elevating parent and caregiver voice in designing a lot of the policies and informing policymakers. We've received grants for both 2022 and 2023 from Birth to Five. You heard about some of those activities last year. The big focus of those two grants was COVID recovery with a specific focus on regaining enrollment in early childhood programs. As we talked about last year, the pandemic we lost a lot of gains with preschool enrollment during the pandemic. And so the focus of those last 2 years was re-engaging families in early learning programs. And we have a chart that shows that we're really on track with a lot of that, which is pretty exciting. And then we have a proposal in for 2024 and are waiting to hear from them on funding. So that's pretty exciting. And the thing that happens because we're an established collaboration and because we have this very unique public-private funding model, people call us all the time and how could we do that in our community? And how did that happen? And could we learn from you about this? And so that's been a pretty cool thing too, to share what we've learned with others, as well as then to learn from effective practices in other places. So those are some good news, exciting pieces. Some less great news pieces are things that we're hearing about. That continues to be a challenge that we hear locally as well as at the state level. So you can sort of see this map. We are not the deepest purple in the sense of the most expensive childcare for toddlers, but we are significantly more expensive than other areas. And we have some specific numbers we can pull up, which is the average cost of center-based care for one toddler, which was about $12,500 last year. So over $1,000 a month for just one toddler. And when we think about median income in our state, that's 37% of the median income for single parents in our state, which is pretty astonishing, right? And when we think about what that might mean at the local level, where we know that families are spending a high percentage of income on rent or mortgage or housing costs, when we think about how other costs have gone up for families, that's pretty untenable, right? And so affordability of childcare continues to be a real challenge. Let's see. Another sort of ongoing challenge, and this one is interesting because this research crosses preschool all the way through high school students and teachers, which is some recent research about students' weaker memories and flexible thinking skills post-pandemic as compared to pre-pandemic. And the same is true for teachers. So this is a study, Harvard has been doing this study across a bunch of schools for a long time, including pre-pandemic, and so had some of this baseline data to compare. Really interesting. And even this is, again, pre-K through high school teachers who are reporting difficulty with working memory, difficulty with flexible thinking, and higher levels of burnout and stress than we've seen probably ever. And that is as true in the early childhood setting as it is across other settings as well. And so that really just kind of points to a lot of the importance of continuing to innovate, continuing to think about how we support early learning environments to accommodate both students and teachers, and their families and their communities who have been through this collective trauma together and are still really recovering in a lot of different ways. So a couple things that we're doing about that. We have a project we call SET&T because it's dynamite. Thank you for laughing at my jokes. So SET&T stands for Social Emotional Tools and Techniques. We're pushing occupational therapy professionals into classrooms who are really great at understanding how regulation and body-based states that make kids and teachers as ready for learning as possible, how to facilitate that in classrooms. We've also developed an employee assistance program. So a lot of times early childhood programs have 1 or 2 staff or a very small staff, and it's difficult to access something like an employee assistance program. So we've been able to sort of serve as the agent for that, and then smaller programs can get access to that through us. So that's been a new initiative that's been pretty popular. And we also partnered with the YMCA here in town to get memberships to the Y for early childhood teachers. And they've done a couple special programs for them as well, like a special early childhood teacher yoga class. Just really thinking about how we can support teachers' mental health, well-being, longevity in the classroom. At the same time as kids and teachers are stressed, so are families. And I'm sure many of you saw this from the Surgeon General, who sort of put out this specific call about parent and caregiver stress levels. Again, this is not unique to early childhood, so you can imagine that these are also the stressors faced by families in D97 and D200 schools. Especially across the bottom of this slide, there are just some pretty stunning numbers where 41% of parents on any given day say they're so stressed that they almost can't function. So when we think about an early childhood classroom that may have 20 kids in it, we can assume that 8 of them have parents on any given day who are so stressed that they can barely function. And again, this holds true for parents across all age groups of children. And it's just a pretty stark reminder of all that families are going through. This is one of our lovely partners, Tally, who just really talked about the pressure she feels as a parent and as an early childhood provider, right? Because when we know things about brain development and how important the first 5 years of life are, we feel this immense pressure to get it right. And we should get it right, but right doesn't mean perfect. Right just means good enough of the time. And so how we think about supporting families, caregivers, parents in reducing that pressure that they feel and sort of easing some of those stress valves where we can ease them. So I'm just going to pause for a minute, I think. Oh, hold on. I'm going to go through some recommendations from the Surgeon General. That's what I'm going to do. So one of the things that came out of this report were just some recommendations from the National Surgeon General, thinking about ways that communities, community organizations, and school systems can help address this issue, such as equipping parents and caregivers with resources and connecting families with one another, as well as with support services, creating opportunities to build supportive social connections between and across parents and caregivers, and elevating the voices of parents and caregivers to strengthen and shape community programs and investments. So again, a couple things that we as a collaboration are doing. We offer parent leadership training every year, which brings families together in small cohorts where they develop leadership skills, but also define goals for themselves and for their families and their communities, and they work together on those. Equipping caregivers with resources. We have a coordinated intake warm line. It's a single phone number, so families can call. And a lot of times families call with one need in mind, and Miss Lanita, who answers that call on our end, hears what they're saying and says, I also heard you say this. Did you know that you might qualify for subsidized childcare? Did you know that there's a WIC office in our town? Did you know that there's a home visiting program where someone could come to your home and work with you and your child? So that really is a family-driven service that just serves to hopefully defragment that system that's a little bit all over the place, and also let people know what's out there and available, because a lot of times we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what questions to ask. But when we're offered a resource or information that can be helpful, that's really meaningful. So we fielded 607 contacts to that call number in the last year. And then cultivating supportive social connections. We offer all sorts of things that are helping families connect with one another in those early childhood years. So workshops on topics like potty training, which is a popular one. Also a giant source of stress in early childhood. So that's a way that we sort of both bring people together and help sort of release some of that pressure and stress they're feeling to get everything exactly perfectly right. We do kid-friendly activities throughout the community, like at the farmers market, and an ongoing workshop series called the Chicago Parent Program that's focused on sort of parenting skills development for families of young children. So now I'm going to pause and just sort of hear from all of you, like, what did you hear that is striking a chord with you? What are you doing across your settings that you think is helping address some of these challenges that we talked about? Is there anything you wish we would do or we could all do together? Just love to hear your perspectives.
Well, I would, I would like to say, so the report's awesome. It's super thorough and I really appreciate it. The thing that that was really astonishing for me, one of the takeaways was the recent data from the Erickson Institute on non-traditional children that are in the non-traditional hour category with their families. I mean, 40% is, that's a really sobering. I mean, there's a huge amount of kids that are not getting, it exposes a huge equity issue that we're in the midst of right now. And I would love to talk more about that. I'd like to talk more about how that is a coming into greater focus as a priority for the collaboration and looking at how that can, at least in the short term and long term, be improved on. Short term, looking at different advocacy coalitions and thinking with different community organizations, you know, through the TriGov perspective, how we can start to meet that some of those needs.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. So non-traditional care hours, it's certainly something we hear locally. Families who are working swing shifts, unpredictable shifts because of retail, right? Weekends, overnights, longer hours. And a lot of our early childhood system here has part-time, part-day programs, programs that only are a couple hours a day or a few days a week, and much more limited care that extends those hours. So we do have one 24-hour daycare in town. And we have a lot of the family childcare homes that are much smaller, that have smaller capacity, tend to have more extended hours because the nature of licensing, staffing, and coverage in those programs is a little easier to navigate than classrooms of 17, where you have to have that sort of ratio and end-to-end coverage. So a couple of things that we're doing, and you'll hear a little bit more about this, but we'd like to understand what that looks like at the local level, sort of at the bigger scale. So you'll hear a little bit about some family survey and focus group work that we're doing that can help inform some of our thinking. And then we've also partnered with several state level coalitions that are looking at that challenge. So the Raising Illinois Coalition and others that We the Village that are really trying to figure out what are the policy solutions to this, right? What are the policy barriers that make it difficult to offer non-traditional care? It's staffing, it's work-life balance for folks, it's safe, adequate sleeping spaces, it's physical buildings as much as staffing issues, right? So all of those challenges, we'd love to understand how they're playing out at the local level and then how families are working around that. Families have some pretty incredible and creative solutions, right? With family, friend, and neighbor care. But one of our goals is to ensure that family, friend, and neighbor care is safe and enriching and supportive and building the development of the children that we'd like to see, right? Which is some of what we hope to see in structured and formal care. But it's definitely stunning, that number. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm curious about your support of, I'm sorry. I'm curious about your experience with reaching out to some of the more marginalized folks, both in terms of being lifetime enrolled, but also like new arrivals or people who are experiencing housing instability. So it seems like, I mean, I see some of the women on the street and they have young children with them. And so I'm curious if you try to do outreach or what you offer, or even folks who are experiencing housing instability, like what are they able to access?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think a year ago, I'm looking at my village friends, a year ago, we really sort of experienced locally what had been happening nationally for quite some time, right? Which was and locally, in addition to nationally, but sort of an influx of new arrival families. And one of the things that we did that we've been working on the last several years is ensuring that all our materials are available in English and Spanish. We also recognized that at that time there was a lot of sort of mutual aid community support going on, which was wonderful. And so community members who were connecting directly with families through church, through neighborhood networks, through incredible volunteer work that had been going on before families arrived here. And so we also looked at reaching those folks in addition to directly reaching newly arrived families to help people navigate a pretty challenging system, right? So there are policy challenges that we found that were pretty difficult to overcome. One of them being, if you are a family who is experiencing homelessness, you're eligible for 6 months of subsidized childcare. That is wonderful. That is an incredible thing that the state of Illinois started a couple of years ago. It really offers kids routine, consistency, predictability, meals, socialization, and it allows their parents and caregivers time to meet with attorneys, look at apartments, get records expunged, go try to get a license without any documentation to back it up, right? So it's this incredible policy. But at the end of those 6 months, you need to be working or in school. And for a lot of the newly arrived migrant families, especially, that wasn't a realistic timeline. And so we were working with folks individually to say, when do you want to start the clock on your 6 months of this? Because if you start it too soon, that benefit is expired and then, we're stuck. And so it was a very, I would say, a challenging and pretty individualized conversation. It's one of the things that our team is really good at, though, is outreach and being in communities and being in partnership with other organizations and entities who are sort of sharing with us, here's what we're seeing, here's what we need. Could you send someone to talk about this? And the team is really good at being nimble and being able to connect. So I think that's an ongoing challenge. And I think you're right that there are folks who are who have more access barriers because of language, because of income, because of stressors, because of fear, because of you name it. And it is harder for us to find those folks. And so just continued effort at outreach. Absolutely. Thank you. Otherwise, we're gonna keep rolling. So, as you know, in our giant report, usually you see even more charts and graphs than you see this year, which is astonishing to say. But some of those charts and graphs are on hold because we have had a transition with our research partner. So since 2013, we worked with Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago, and our research team moved over to NORC, also at the University of Chicago. And while that sounds like a simple move, it is apparently a little bit more complicated than just two things at the University of Chicago. And so that's has temporarily paused data access and sharing while we work data sharing agreements through legal channels to make sure that those meet everybody's needs on both sides. So you have a lot of data and information in this report, and you will have even more in February when we release the sort of an update to this report. And we're pretty, those things are in process. So our data partner combines, NORC will and Chapin Hall did combine data from us at the collaboration as well as from D97. So looking at kindergarten registration data, looking back at experiences like where children were enrolled in preschool, what kind of early learning experiences they had. We have a customized database for our ages and stages developmental screening questionnaire. That's a cool tool that helps us see trends and follow up on needs. So we are all still collecting the data that we usually do. We're just not yet sharing and analyzing it. But the data that we do have is still really cool charts and graphs. So as we mentioned, outreach and engagement is a real big part of what we do. A lot of times, again, we don't know what we don't know. Families of young children maybe hadn't paid attention to things before and now have a young child and realize that there are resources or information that they're interested in. And so our outreach initiatives have really grown. And one of the things that we consistently see year over year is that families genuinely aren't aware of some of the things that exist that they may be eligible for. And so we have a lot of the same conversations about, did you know the state offers subsidized childcare? Did you know you might qualify for food support for your family? And so we're really trying to be out and about and visible in communities, meeting families pretty literally where they are. So this last year, we were at 60 different outreach events. We hosted 15 of them. So this, you can see that this work really happens in partnership with others, which is a big part of what helps us reach into community and connect with a wide range of families. And you can also see just the robust distribution of resources that happens at those events. The team back here is laughing because we have a lot of outreach events going on even this weekend, and they pack a wagon for each one. And the wagons, it's like a 6-wagon weekend. I don't even know. We have so much stuff going on. And it's really exciting to see that go out into the community. And the thing about being so present and visible in the community that we've noticed that's really important is that families over time will say, oh, I saw you at Juneteenth at the village. Oh, I saw you at Trunk or Treat. And the more they see us, the more likely they are to then engage. And so at a second, third, fourth, fifth conversation is when we may hear that there's a resource need that they hadn't previously shared. And so that more than once a week being out there, 6 wagons is absolutely worth it because it can take that time to build trust together. We also continue to fund our home visiting program with our partner over at Easter Seals. This is in-home, so home visits with a trained parent educator who goes out to families' homes at least twice a month. And then they also offer group socialization opportunities. They focus on the prenatal age all the way up through age 5. The dream is to enroll everyone prenatally and continue home visiting with them until they enroll in an early learning program. And sometimes even after they enroll in an early learning program, home visiting offers really individualized support and attention to families. And so some families who are navigating higher levels of risk or greater challenges really benefit from a person coming into their home in addition to being enrolled in an early learning program. So this uses a lovely curriculum called Parents as Teachers, which really builds on strengths and assets and resources that exist in families and in families' homes. So this isn't the sort of thing where someone rolls in with a really cool basket of toys. This is the kind of thing where someone rolls in and asks you to save your toilet paper tubes and play with water in your sink and that sort of thing. So using resources that already exist in homes and using that intrinsic motivation of parents and caregivers to have their children learn and grow and develop. So home visiting is a really cool and special thing that we do in this community. And what we find is that home visiting tends to reach families who are navigating higher levels of risk because of income, linguistic isolation, social isolation. We hear from a lot of families who are new and don't have a lot of support. And so I think on average, our home visiting families have at least 2 of the identified risk factors on that long list of risk factors that Parents as Teachers identifies, which is really great because those are folks who otherwise might not be connected to formal resources. Our developmental screening program keeps trucking too, and this has been one of our signature initiatives all along, and we added it up and have done over 15,000 developmental screenings since not in the last year, since our contract started. That would have been a real lot of wagons. So that's really comprehensive developmental screening for children. That's hearing and vision screenings. You can see the numbers of kiddos who get referred are very low when we do those hearing and vision screenings, but we always think about, I was that kid who couldn't see early on, and when they caught it, I realized there was this whole world beyond literally right in front of my nose. And so those 18 referrals or 21 referrals for hearing issues are really meaningful because when we catch those early, we can get kiddos the resources and the tools that they need to participate. And the same with developmental screening and social emotional screenings, that those help us identify issues early and connect families with the resources that they need so that they arrive at kindergarten with fewer unmet needs. Professional development, our early childhood symposium has also been one of our signature events. This year was our 21st year of hosting that. And one of the cool things about our symposium specifically is that that is extremely driven by the needs and interests of the early childhood community. So we have a committee of about 22 early learning professionals who are part of that professional development committee, who decide on the theme, who decide on the keynote speaker, and who review the proposals that we receive to determine which ones will present workshops. And that's a wide-ranging group of early learning professionals. In the last year, it's included kindergarten teachers, family daycare home providers, center-based preschool teachers, infant toddler teachers, so a real range of folks. I'm sure this is true for our friends at D97 and D200 too, that a lot of professional development is very compliance driven, which is wonderful. We absolutely want people trained in first aid and CPR. We absolutely want people trained in ethical practice, and we want them to have professional development opportunities that excite them, that remind them of the joy of teaching, that attend to their needs and interests. And so this being a really community-driven initiative helps us do that, helps us really connect with educators in ways that are meaningful and interesting to them. Last up to kindergarten was this year on May 19th. We have had the luckiest weather or the unluckiest weather, depending on how hot you get in the sun, I will say. But we had about 200 families who attended that. Early learning programs and community organizations, local kindergarteners, and all of our D97 schools representing Inforce. And we sent a survey out after Blast Off to Kindergarten to say, what was the most useful thing to you? What helped the most? And it was probably 99.999% of the answers were meeting people from my child's new school. That was really meaningful to folks, that sort of warm handoff, that opportunity to connect early on. And I have a favorite Blast Off to Kindergarten story, which was I was standing near one of the entrances to Ream Park, and there was a mom who was coming in with her little one, and the little one did not look particularly happy to be there. And I said, well, good morning, my friends. I'm glad you're here today. Are you excited? And they said, no. Firmly articulated, full sentence. I said, okay, cool. Sorry. And I happened to catch them on their way out. And that child had a t-shirt from the new school and a yard sign from the new school and a book about kindergarten and foam in her hair from the Park District's foam cannon. And the mom said, we feel so much better now. We feel so much more ready. So just that opportunity to connect and meet people and take some of that worry out and really be able to celebrate is just a cool and really meaningful thing for little ones and their parents. So as I referenced previously, we have seen a real rebound in enrollment of our public free preschool spots. So our preschool for all slots here in Oak Park, which is really wonderful news to see that recovery pretty complete in terms of regaining pre-pandemic enrollment levels. So I will turn around and look at you all and say your wagons are worth it. Like getting out there in the community and helping connect people with these resources really matters. And that's really a whole community lift of encouragement, of making connections, of building those bridges and getting kiddos into programs that help them and their families achieve what their goals are. So we're really excited to see that. And on the topic of public funding, I guess this is an exciting breaking news update, which is earlier this year, we helped our partners at the Day Nursery, who are one of our publicly funded preschool, our Preschool for All programs. We helped them apply for what's called Prevention Initiative or PI funding. And those are the public dollars that support programming for infants and toddlers. So just like Preschool for All is free preschool for children ages 3 and 4, Prevention Initiative is free high quality center-based care for children birth to 2. And we learned today that they got that funding. So that's super exciting for our community to have additional state level support, funding high quality slots for even younger children than preschool. And that is our first public birth to two funding in Oak Park. So we're super proud of their work in that and excited to support them in that implementation and excited to have that as a resource in our community. It's small scale, but we are doing what we can to address those family concerns about affordability of programming, right? So we also want to talk about some of the lovely work that we've done together with all of you this year. We're calling it Glows and Grows because early childhood people love rhymes. So Glows, District 200, I cannot tell you how much we love your high school students. I have been an early childhood person my whole career because I'm horrified by teenagers. Much like probably a lot of your teachers here are horrified by 2-year-olds. There's room for all of us. And then your high schoolers came and volunteered and I said, could they come back every week? I love them so much. So they came from the Leadership and Launch program, and we just had this really wonderful experience where they helped us deliver early childhood resource directories. They wrote welcome letters as part of our effort to connect with new residents. One of your high schoolers dressed up as Cece the Flying Pig at Blast Off to Kindergarten, which if you thought you were hot standing in a t-shirt, you can only imagine what this poor child did in a felt pig head. But that was incredible. We had the opportunity to work with a couple of high school students through Lemonade, the fundraiser in River Forest. We had 2 OPRF sophomores who were our co-chairs on that. And we also got a grant from the Future Philanthropists program, which is a program that works with high school students here and at other local high schools to help develop their skills as future philanthropists. So I am not horrified by teenagers at all. As it turns out, they're lovely and I really enjoy them. So kudos to you for churning out those great students and the opportunities for us to connect with them through service fair and civics and that kind of thing. Grows, which is like where we're hoping to grow our work together. We are always happy to come be guest speakers or visit student groups if they would like to hear about early childhood career options. Students can continue to volunteer with us in a ton of different ways. Someone came in, she colored hair. She did temporary hair dye at Lemonade. We just loved the Oak Park High School kids. So we would love to continue to leverage them as volunteers. We're excited about opportunities to build pipelines of workforce, right? So thinking about ways that we can support career and experience connections between D200 students and community learning programs. And we're really excited that soon enough, there will be an opportunity for a D200 data sharing agreement. So as you know, our IGA contract started in 2013, and it took a while to build our data systems up. So the first cohort of kindergarteners that we have really strong data for is the kids who were in kindergarten in 2015 and 2016. So that cohort of kids who are now in 8th grade. So we're really excited to think about what are some of the data points at District 200 that we might be interested in learning more about. Now that we're sort of starting to see our little ones move through our school system. So everybody loves the data sharing agreement. District 97, SER glows, just as you heard, Blast Off to Kindergarten was such a joyful, wonderful event. We've loved getting to partner with you with the subcommittee that you'll get to hear more about from Dr. Lofton in a little bit, and a lot of collaboration work on data, both looking at what we have and being curious about what we don't have and what we don't know and how we might learn that. And we've been really excited to think about this portrait of an 8th grade graduate and the exciting vision that you have for your young people as they transition out of D97 into D200, and what the roots of those dimensions and that portrait look like in the early childhood years. So those are all really exciting glows. and ways that we hope to continue to grow. One of the things that you'll hear a little bit more about in a bit is the basics, which is some community-wide messaging that we're working on. We are working currently on looking at kindergarten registration and seeing if there might be some questions to add to that very robust data collection that help us learn about families, that help guide our work. And we've been planning, and once our data use agreements are updated, a data retreat or hackathon, depending on which term you prefer. Hackathon feels very like I need a mask and I need to be like Mission Impossible, which I'm kind of into, but then retreat could be spa-like. So either way, I think this is going to be an awesome opportunity for in-depth analysis to learn more about what our data set can tell us, right? So because it's been a growing data set, there are some things that we can disaggregate, but the number is much too small to be statistically significant, but it can still tell us some interesting things. So the opportunity to sort of look at that data and see what might be emerging, see what it is starting to be able to tell us, even if it's not yet ready to be sort of this passes all of the data robustness challenges. The Village of Oak Park, we have had such a lovely time connecting with village staff about work that we're doing with business districts, planning special events and activities for kids and families. We loved being at the Juneteenth celebration. We connected with folks about Building Safety Month, which doesn't sound fun, but as it turns out, there are tiny hard hats involved, so it's extremely fun. And little kids are the ones to get invested in things like building safety, because they will go home and talk to their families about what is our fire evacuation plan. Where are the exits? What are the safety concerns in our home? So it was really exciting to think about an early childhood angle to something that might not have had an early childhood angle previously. We did a lot of work with the public health department in the village around coordinating support for families who arrived, migrant families and asylum-seeking families. And then we've continued the work of the Oak Park Public Health Department, joining our Directors Roundtable, which is a real help to early childhood programs. Who, through COVID, obviously we're navigating challenges there, but also continue to navigate things like hand and foot and mouth disease and other weird early childhood crud things that go around. And so having that access and those relationships in place really helps our programs continue to offer safe and healthy environments. Continue to get really reputable information that they can then pass on and share with families about things like vaccinations, flu season, that sort of thing that's really helpful about sustaining health and wellness in those environments. And some of the things that we're excited about are construction equipment with googly eyes, right? So we're working on this Renew the Avenue, which is happening on Oak Park Avenue right in front of our office, that will be super fun construction. Everybody loves construction. I'm certain there's no complaints about it. But we're interested, kids love construction. And so thinking about, are there early childhood angles? Are there ways that we can make that an exciting and an opportunity for kids to learn and get to see giant equipment in action? Continuing to coordinate connections with new residents. That's something that we're really interested in is catching people as soon as they move into town and figuring out how we can get information about what we do to them. We see a lot of families moving in as their children are little or as they're expecting children, which is a really exciting opportunity. We're excited to partner with community screening events. So offering not just what we do at early care and education and healthcare sites, but also pop-up screening opportunities for families who may not be connected with any formal resources. And we've been connected with folks at the village on a coordinated plan around homelessness and housing affordability, which are also really important early childhood priorities in addition to being important priorities for lots of other populations. So as you think about all of that, I would love to hear, like, what are you excited about in our work together coming up, and what opportunities do you see?
There's a lot that you shared that is really exciting. So really thank you for when we're going through this, as thoroughly as we have, and I just want to draw out in the conversation, highlight, the very first time I met you, we talked about data. And kind of tracking and longitudinally, to the high school years, and you're sitting here talking about that exact same thing in very realistic ways. So that is lovely. It's absolutely wonderful. So I look forward to that conversation. And when it's time to sit down and really talk about the data sharing agreement, our doors open. Just
I love it. I'm super excited.
And there's also another possibility. I mean, there's two notes, but I appreciate, the shout out and the positive influence that the high school students have had. We have our civics classes have a required, perfect, see now your head. We have our service learning component to those courses, and that might be another way to get more high school students engaged in the literature. So I'd be happy to connect you with somebody to broaden and deepen that connection.
Thank you.
I wanted to bring up something that we talked about probably last February. So I believe that was the last time we met because we didn't have a spring meeting. And one of the things that we were talking about was looking at partnering with the medical community more, and what are the barriers to having access to all this knowledge in the later prenatal care states and immediate postnatal care and early pediatric care. It seems so crucial. It seems like such a no-brainer, and I know that there's some systematic barriers to that. And I was wondering, with the newly created Department of Early Childhood, do we see an opportunity to advocate and lobby for meaningful, systematic change in this area? Because it seems like it should be such low-hanging fruit to access parents at that stage, as we provide them with all the other information about all the other dangers and all the other pitfalls, all these things, that the data-driven things that you can do to prepare your child to thrive. I'm curious about your perspective on that, if you see it, or just to bring up this topic again, because
No, I mean, healthcare is there are some touch points that most families have, and healthcare is one of them, right? And as you mentioned, there are systemic challenges that make it tough to work with that system. I'll name sort of one big data challenge that is not unique to us at all, which is just timely birth data. The state is years behind in reporting that, and so literal years behind. And so it's really hard for us to plan and organize and think about how many kids are coming into this community, how many little ones were born in this zip code. We only know that from 4 years ago or 3 years ago. So there's that sort of one. Two, one of the challenges that we have is because Oak Park has incredible proximity to incredible healthcare facilities, there is not one birthing hospital. There are a bajillion. So people are getting their care in the city, people are going to Hinsdale, people are going to Loyola, people are going to Northwestern. So our system is also very fragmented, right, in that respect. So a lot of people are getting prenatal care locally, but it's hard for us to know who and where, right? So I think we have health and health equity and health access as a priority in our current strategic plan. And continuing to sort of make inroads there and figuring out for us, partnering with pediatric practices is great, but what you're saying is super important to us, which is partnering earlier. And so thinking about access points for that. And you'll hear a little bit in a moment about the basics, which is this socio-ecological saturation model. Also rolls off the tongue. But one of the things that we're excited about that is that it gives us an opportunity to offer resources to healthcare settings that let them support sort of pushing those messages forward, which is part of what we'd be hoping to do, which is sort of get some of those gentle messages to families that in addition to folic acid, counting and singing and reading with your child and managing your own stress and mental health are also really important things. And so that's an exciting way that we're envisioning partnering with healthcare, both locally and hoping to sort of push a little more broadly. But I think when we do some sort of informal analysis with folks about where people got their prenatal care and where babies were born, there is not one single place that arises as like, oh, this is the one. Like half the babies born in this town are at this hospital. It really is all over. So it's super interesting. And it is also, I think, because that is such a touch point for so many families, a really important space. What's going to be interesting about the new early childhood department is that although they're consolidating a lot of things, they're not consolidating everything because they can't, right? Early childhood kind of crosses into a lot of different areas. So for example, early childhood special education will continue to live under ISB, even though other elements like the free publicly funded preschool that currently lives under ISB will move over to the new department. So there are still a lot of things that we're anticipating as being challenges to sort out. And then other things we're paying attention to are that new Medicaid waiver and trying to see if there are opportunities there. The Medicaid waiver for Illinois is looking a lot at maybe non-traditional use of Medicaid funds to address some of the social determinants of health. And so opportunities there to connect with folks who are doing doula work and transportation and affordable food and housing and understanding how we can kind of integrate there too. Yeah. Thank you.
So I apologize for walking in late. I think our goals should be that our young children will grow up to be better than local superintendents, because I thought this was a virtual thing. I will also just say that there are a lot of interesting things, but I was totally the googly eyes on the. I have never seen that.
We're quite enamored.
Is that in Oak Park, or is that somewhere in Oak Park?
That is not an Oak Park. That's just, we've been working with the Renew the Avenue people and like have all these wishes about kids love construction equipment. And it's even cooler when you put Google eyes on it.
If that's supposed to be for young children, I must be reaching the full circle. I think I found myself watching that for a while. That's pretty cool. So I always appreciate the conversation. I think one of the things, in that question, what opportunities are we missing? What are we looking forward to? I think about the equity and access questions that I know that, we've been raising in the subcommittee. I think I just want to put a critical question out, for like say a school district that is serving universally, we have to ask ourselves, these equity questions, given our universal service, how do we center and ensure access in a historically, inequitable system, right? So that is the challenge of thinking about how to create those spaces and shift the organization. One of the things that I think about in this space, where we are not able to provide universal access, is that so the entry and the pie is already small. And so if the equitable access question isn't the only question, then we are, I would say, hyper shrinking our impact. In other words, and I'm just asking as a question for us to consider, when early childhood experiences are so expensive and so inaccessible, especially to families that don't make a lot of money, shouldn't this effort that we are here to convene together be 100% focused on equitable access, as opposed to a subcommittee as we might have in a larger school district that is already needs to guarantee universal access? So I don't say that we have to answer that, but I do think it's a critical question. Is the equity work here actually appropriate as a subcommittee? or is it actually the work? And something that we require ourselves in everything to say, for example, the new grant that was awarded, which is really exciting, the PI funds. How do we make sure that, 100% of those opportunities go to families that otherwise wouldn't have them? Because if we leave it to chance, is that's going to be, I would guess, something like, 20%. So I welcome your response, but otherwise happy to just kind of put it out here as a question for us to consider.
No, thank you. I mean, I think I personally love this statement about that being the work, right? And it not being a subcommittee or not a piece of the work, but it is the work. Early childhood is so complicated because there's almost nothing that's universal the way that there is in a school district. And so I think we're constantly challenging ourselves to consider equity angles with all aspects of our work, right? And to think about who are we not reaching, who are we not connecting with, who are we not hearing from, and how do we do that? How do we ensure that those are folks that we're finding that feel that we are here for them, right? That understand that home visiting is for you, the warm line is for you, the outreach events are for you. And the goal of finding and connecting those families with resources so that they are prioritized in those resources that are most accessible to them. Yeah.
And I appreciate that, we can start here, like, know that that's a shared commitment. That's not something to take for granted. There are so many other places where you can, like, a minority voice in the room. We can safely ask that question. I do think, though, that putting that question into practice is something we need to engage with a lot more struggle, and courage than, than is normally the case anywhere. I know that, like, for example, I don't know if this is still true, but some of the early childhood grants used to refer to hard to reach families.
It's not my least favorite, but I hate.
Yeah, and so in the grant application, it would say, what's your plan for the hard to reach families? So it's all coded, like, families aren't hard to reach, it's just, the deficiency is in the system.
Correct.
And so it just, what might it look like to, for us to really, like, turn that inside out and challenge ourselves to say, like, we know that if we really make this money and resources go to the families that, for whom access must be provided through us redirecting resources, we know that we're going to see in, the next 10, 15 years, radically different outcomes. We won't even have to wait for the data sharing agreements. It will be evident, so that's, I think, the next edge challenge for us, and we're all set up already to do that.
Yeah, thank you.
So for the partnership with the village, I'm just sort of looking through and was listening very intently to the partnership opportunities looking forward that you mentioned. But I know that in the past, we took some ARPA money and created that mini grant program, right? I wonder if something for us to think about the village and the collaboration is whether or not there are any forward-looking opportunities at the early childhood provider end, right? So what you have listed in here are opportunities to connect sort of at the beginning rate of the process, right? Connect the collaboration with families. But there certainly seemed to be a nice partnership to have the village provide some support at the childcare provider end of this whole sort of pipeline. And so, and maybe we can, you can think about it, I'll think about it too. Maybe we could set up some time to talk about whether the recipients of that grant program, what they thought about it. I know there seemed to be some funds that maybe were not fully exhausted. Why was that? we're sort of figuring out now moving forward, right? We've got sort of these little last bits of ARPA dollars. I don't know that there's the possibility of a continuation of that with that source of that money, that pool of money. But I do wonder if there are two things. One is lessons that we can learn as a partner from the village's perspective in how we support early childhood providers. And then two, because there was money left over, money left on the table, and I always wonder why is that and when that happens. And then the second thing is, if there is some sort of connection to funding, we can either help facilitate, we can maybe create in some way that supports that piece of the early childhood pipeline, because I do think that piece of it is just as important as the beginning piece of it, right, where you're getting connected with family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so just something that I thought of as I was reading through these paragraphs, sort of future looking at partnership opportunities. That's one that I would want to capture in the net too.
Love it. I love it. Thank you. Yeah, that grant program was wonderful. I think some of the formulas were such that, if programs had served a higher number of kids getting CCAP or that sort of thing. So I think that accounted for some of the difference, but I also know that was really meaningful funding for programs. And then it's really innovative, honestly, to provide funding to the sector at the local level. Like that doesn't happen, but.
Yeah, and maybe something to think about, when if we can connect later is maybe some sort of summary back to the board as to what the impact was, right? Because I know, I worked to get my colleagues' support for that, and that they were very supportive of it. But it's always nice to hear. So then, how did that work out, right? For those of us that, as we support programs like that, it's just nice to kind of close the loop and sort of hear what the outcome was of that. Yeah, that would be great.
Sure. Love it. Thank you. Okay, I referenced a lot of the sort of looking ahead things, but I'm gonna just highlight a couple here. So the first is the basics, which we mentioned. This is an initiative that was, it started out of the Harvard Achievement Gap Institute, really looking at equity issues in outcomes and access for young children and that sort of achievement gap that shows up. And so Dr. Ron Ferguson was at Harvard and got very interested in that and thought about what can whole communities do to support children's development in the first 5 years. And I actually think that there's a lot of this that already happens in our community. There are so many resources and assets in families, in communities, in community institutions. And what the basics looks to do is just sort of leverage those existing assets and build them. So the idea of the basics is that it's these 5 principles that are good for all children, and especially important in the first 5 years of life. And that these are often already things that parents and caregivers and families and aunties and people at church and someone you see at the grocery store do with children, and that they are meaningful. And so giving parents and families credit for the wonderful things that they do in those informal ways, as opposed to informal early learning programs. And giving our community the opportunity to also support that early learning, whether they are an early learning program or not. The basics crosswalk directly to the Illinois Early Learning Standards. And we see a lot of opportunity to integrate thinking about the portrait of an 8th grade graduate and those dimensions and how some of those roots are here. So what the basics are is maximizing love and managing stress. And they very intentionally start with that one, recognizing that parents and caregivers are the most important people to little children, and that parents and caregivers are 40% of the time too stressed out to function. That absolutely impacts the little ones in their care, right? And so what can we do to support and minimize some of that stress for families. And then the other four are really about supporting development, and you can see different developmental domains. So talking, singing, and pointing, counting, grouping, and comparing. That's that early math and numeracy. Exploring through movement and play, and reading and discussing stories, which are all things that everyone who's around little kids can do. And what the basics does is sort of segment the community. So we say healthcare providers. What might it look like for families to get these messages in healthcare settings? Early learning providers. What might it look like for families to get these messages in those settings? Businesses. What might it look like for families to get these messages in your setting? So we can imagine grocery shopping, right? There's opportunities to count, to group, to compare. There are opportunities to talk with your child about what you're doing, right? And so there are all of these opportunities that are happening all day, every day. And when we can sort of leverage and harness the power of those opportunities and help folks focus and recognize that they're doing great early childhood development work, that helps set those foundations for later learning. So what we're looking at in our Oak Park rollout is engagement with partners and capacity building. So to your point about healthcare, right? Partnering with as many healthcare sites in town as will have us about what would this look like in your setting? How might you share these messages in a waiting room, in a well child visit? What might this look like across all different settings, right? So with partners like Beyond Hunger, what might it look like for you to think about this as you're doing food distribution? For partners like Housing Forward, what might it look like to integrate this into housing situations, right? So just really looking at segmenting the population and thinking about, in this setting, what would it look like to share these messages with families and children? And then there's lots of opportunities. The basics have lots of crosswalks to existing initiatives like Reach Out and Read. That obviously Reach Out and Read is really highlighting one of those basics. And so it's not looking to supplant any of that cool stuff that's going on. It's really just looking to leverage and push out that community messaging as much as possible. So that is really a way to celebrate and acknowledge the incredible resources that already exist in families and that already exist in communities. And when I think about this community and I think about things like Move with the Mayor, or a big Juneteenth celebration, or a foam cannon, or a story time at the library, there are all of these things happening all the time, right? And I think for parents to give themselves credit for all of the ways that they're supporting their children's learning and development in those early years, to really intentionally recognize that and uplift that is a lot of the intention of this work. So let me pause and just see if there's questions or if that's like.
Just one quick question. I got thinking with the point you brought up, the providers. How do we, is there currently a way that the collaboration is supporting providers with the knowledge of funding opportunities that are out there for, like I'm thinking like IFF, builds gives venture capital support to early childhood providers. Do we have something like that we give to providers to help them navigate this journey, get through some of the growth stages?
Yeah, we do. So we publish a monthly newsletter that goes out to all of our providers in addition to the monthly directors roundtable. And at both of those opportunities, we share funding opportunities. So part of my role, but everyone behind me too, we're sort of constant prospect researching, but there's dedicated time that I set aside for prospect researching on behalf of early learning programs. So in that newsletter, we include funding opportunities, scholarship opportunities, training and capacity building opportunities. So we just shared, for example, a free workshop for them on writing grants, because for a lot of programs that is not a skill set. They're really good at many, many things that I am terrible at. And I'm impressed that they can potty train and teach kids to talk and do such cool things. And writing a grant is a really different skill set, especially a government grant. So in addition to sharing that information and those resources, we do also offer technical assistance. So in the writing of the prevention initiative application that the day nursery did, we have done a bunch of Zoom calls with them to talk it through. We wrote some of the sections that were the context setting because we have that data at our fingertips because of our work together, right? So we could say, we know here are some of the risk factors present in our community. Here are the languages. Here are the economic circumstances, right? So we were able to help with some of that context setting as well. So that's definitely a goal, is to both share those opportunities and then to help programs leverage and make use of those opportunities. I think the ARPA grant is a great example that our staff did a lot of outreach and support with that, because our programs are adept at navigating government systems like DCFS licensing, like the Child Care Assistance Program. This involved navigating new government systems that they didn't have templates for or experience with. And so our staff was able to provide some of that technical assistance. So that's absolutely something that we are intentional about doing and sharing, and then also make ourselves available to support, because that is a process, right? Writing a state grant. Whew. Thank you. Okay, a next exciting upcoming thing is a family survey and some focus groups. So we last did this in 2016 as we were building out our family engagement programming. And obviously a lot has shifted since 2016. Some things about raising young children are pretty universal, but the landscape is also very different right now. And so we're interested in repeating that process, but also deepening that process. So in partnership, we will design and implement and analyze both surveys and focus groups from the prenatal stage through kindergarten entry, so that we can better understand families' experiences, their hopes, their dreams, their needs, their strengths, what they see and use as resources in our community. Because there's that gap, right, between actual resources and perception of resources. And we really want to understand families' perceptions of what's available to them. And we want to understand where families are going and looking for resources and information and support, so that those are environments that we start to target with a lot of the things that we would like families to hear. And then where are families not going and what are they not doing that could help us understand how we could better message and get families connected with those things. So we really want to gather insights that will inform our family engagement strategies, with an absolute focus, I think, to your point, Dr. Shaw, on equity and access, particularly in the aftermath of the pandemic, which disproportionately impacted several different groups in our community. And so both survey and focus groups really intentionally designed so that we're reaching families who may not have responded to a survey, families whose voices we may not have heard yet. So really intentional, and I think very inspired by the work that D97 did with your portrait focus groups, to connect with families and ensure that families were around the table to share their feedback on that, with really explicit and intentional invitations. So that's really, I think, the goal of the focus groups. So we would love to also know from you all if there are questions or hopes you have about survey and focus groups at all. And you can also, this is a very early stage project, so you don't have to have perfect research questions, right? You can also think on that.
Mary, do you connect with our board of health at all?
We do. No, not with the Board of Health so much. That's a great call. With the Public Health Department, Board of Health. We're gonna keep talking.
Yeah, that's all.
It's not fun, and this is very in the beginning stage yet, but, given the success of Last Opportunity, one of the things I would love to see is how soon do they want to be connected with D97? How soon is too soon, if there is such a thing? Because the sooner we can kind of get everybody flowing in that direction.
Just before we move on to much, I've made a few notes over during our meeting. The village will be lifting up a new welcome center. So I looked through our neighborhood services division, and providing a little bit more access and information for new residents. The clerk's office and about neighborhood services division can help with that. So help hold me accountable to connecting in place, as well as Board of Health and Health. Now they are doing their work plans right now. So I'll probably work to connect you with the chair as soon as possible. So if there's anything that you can plan for in 2025 now, then that would be great, as well as, with our DEI department. They also noted that the day nursery has low enrollment right now, and they also have scholarships available. So do we feel cross below help spread that? And if they were to need funding for those scholarships, connecting them with additional resources to expand that scholarship program, including potentially the village. You said you work with our homelessness coalition. You also saw, that there's a group called Fit for Mom. That I didn't know about, but that seems like a really cool idea that I'll share with that department too. Just an opportunity for moms to work out and do things like yoga and stuff together. And then, of course, making sure that with your funding, as you share your funding opportunities, that our CDBG process opportunities as part of that. And so that's the thing in the services. Do that.
Well, just two additional super quick things. One, coming up this Saturday is our Fall Family Fun Fest. There is an early childhood resource fair in the library. Last year, almost 500 folks came through that, which was just wonderful. So we have tons of different early learning programs, resources, information, all free for families. There's a costume parade through Scoville Park. There may be a guest grand marshal in the room with us. I don't know. It might be President's Game over there. Might be. And then treats up and down Oak Park Avenue. And then next week, in partnership with the Raising Illinois Coalition and Start Early, we are hosting an event just in support of state level funding for the early intervention system, which is experiencing some pretty historic challenges. The number of children on wait lists for EI services doubled in the last year. And woof, that's bad news for babies. So we're really trying to advocate for increased state funding for that system. We are losing about 500 providers in that system each year in the state. So that's what's contributing to this increased wait time. And really just looking to add our voices to calls to do better for babies. So let me pass it, I think, on over to Dr. Lofton, who's going to give us.
Sure. Thank you. Just wanted to highlight that amazing cross collaboration amongst schools. So really excited to be a part of the team. It is literally like the highlight of whenever it happens. Top connectors or top tier. So really excited about the work that we're doing. And then just wanted to the next slide because the work that we engaged in last year led us to coalesce around a couple of key questions or areas of inquiry, especially to think about equitable access to respondent experiences. So we definitely want to know as about work of this committee, who's accessing early childhood services now, but also accessing and how are we ensuring that the families who need it the most are prioritized. We also are excited about looking backwards and forwards. So what does the longitudinal data suggest regarding the impact of early childhood investments? And then when we're thinking about that from the lens of historically underserved groups. And finally, probably most critically, how might the partnership leverage community opportunities and the clarity of what we know about early learning activities to expand education beyond just programming and really making sure that we're thinking about early learning experiences. So we're just getting into that, and push to the next slide. The work we've had, so we're on our second meeting, but I feel like our so another kind of quick sub meeting, but thinking about those as the areas that are grounding us and figuring out how those actions align. We have been thinking about, as was mentioned before, how do we gather data around those access barriers? So what's preventing families from accessing resources, but also that's the environment, but also thinking about what are the assets that both our community and family bring, so that we can think through how to really think about those together and inform our next steps. And then this idea of what does that sense of belonging look like across as we look at forward and backwards. So not just pre-K to K transition, but also 8th to 9th and beyond. How are we thinking about really focusing again on those families who need it most, and also again need it first, and where are those pain points in the processes? The second area, next slide. Again, looking at the area of inquiry. So I actually like hackathon if I had it. So I feel like it is mission impossible moving screens and doing some things. So I'm really excited about what work will engage in once we get those data agreements signed. So this I think will be a window into kind of where we've been and where we can go and what we can learn around how we're using those critical investments for groups. And then obviously as additional sources of data come up, so the family survey, the focus groups, making sure that we're looking at intentionally the forward and backward ones. And finally, this team. So I think this is kind of once we get a handle on what the data is telling us, what our families are telling us, what our children are telling us, then we can really think about that next step of really the big work of digging into how to make sure that we're using all aspects of our community to really to all the experiences for our youngest learners. And that is it. So hopefully, I don't know if they're overtaking questions, but yeah.
Tri-board meeting topics.
So we just love to hear from you all if there are things that you would love your speaker about, either that we talked about tonight or that are still bubbling on your mind, just what would be useful when we're together again. Here in the South cafeteria, that I understand is a very nice looking cafeteria, on December 3rd. So any thoughts that you all have about topics or things that you heard tonight that you'd like to dig into program together?
Do we, I want to consider guests, I don't know, do we? We have the whole board or? The beginning of tonight was a lot about how stressed and. So as students along this.
I'd love to talk more about meeting the needs of the 40%. I mean, I know it's likely a smaller number, but regardless, it's a huge. We're not doing the work that we're setting out to do. I mean, that's just an absolute alarming statistic. So we should definitely talk about.
So I feel like really appreciate this, Jonathan. I feel a little bit like Tom Kosky asking this question right now before the residents. He has spent a lot of time over the past year plus talking about just governance and how the board works, and my question falls into that category a little bit. I know how we do our meetings and what we do in our meetings is governed by our IGA, defined by our IGA. But this question actually has me asking whether we miss an opportunity to dig deeper in with this group. Because you have like this presentation you just gave, and there's questions and feedback from us. And we're gonna disrupt that for a moment, and we're gonna meet with all of our boards together. And there is a need to both go deeper and then reacquaint everybody who wasn't here right now with the topic we've already discussed. And then we're gonna have another meeting later in the spring. And so maybe a conversation about how the boards function in their various formations to serve the needs, to serve your needs, right? How they define and serve those needs would be a good macro conversation for us to show. Maybe.
I would hope that would help us be as efficient as possible, in that. We can do.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Very good.
What else? All right, I think I will then move to adjourn. I, Jonathan Livingston, move to adjourn at let's see, 7:36 p.m. All those in favor? Aye. Thanks very much.
Thank you.